Hi everyone, Jexa here again. Welcome to another episode of Liquid Loans Behind the Scenes. In this episode, we're going to cover a little bit more about the Wonderfy strategy, which I've talked about, and discuss how you deploy some of the strategies that would fit into that Wonderfy mechanic that I described. So if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, go back and watch the positive feedback loops video where I discussed how we've already won DeFi. Once we've got our HEX savings account, our liquid loans, lending and central bank where we mint our stable coins, PulseX being our exchange where we swap all our tokens, and Pulse Chain being the rails that it runs on. So if you're not familiar with that, go back and watch the price positive feedback loops. This video is going to build on that, and also on the previous video about the haunted strategy. So if you grasp the haunted strategy, that will probably make a lot of what I talk about now a little bit easy to understand as well. Let's jump straight into it. So first of all, a big shout out to all our community admins and the guys that are out there just in the chat room answering all the questions for everyone about everything liquid loans. And not only are they doing that and educating people, but they're coming up with some really cool strategies. So we've got Exponential's Grandma's strategy, the haunted strategy. So that's probably one you've heard a lot about. Hodprul's strategy, the Hex Maxi strategy, JJ strategy, and last but not least, the HexiCat strategy. Now, it's great that everyone's out there and they're figuring out all the cool ways we can use liquid loans to benefit ourselves and the whole ecosystem. So it really is a tool that once you understand those feedback loops that I talked about, the possibilities are endless how you can snap these things together and take gains from one component and push it in through another component, take the gains from that and feed it back through to the previous one. So there's just hundreds of strategies people are going to be able to put together using these tools. So that's not just liquid loans, that's Hex, the PulseX, Pulse itself, so the underlying rail. So they're all price positive. So let's delve into just a high level overview of these strategies. So you just start to, hopefully I just want to sort of get you thinking along the lines of, okay, what can I do? How can I use this? How am I going to use this when it becomes available? So let's jump in and have a quick look. So there's two main strategies or classes of strategies as I see them, and they are accumulation plays, so accumulation strategies, and yield-based plays. Okay, if you've been in HEX for any length of time, you probably understand the yield component. That's why we lock up our HEX, because we get paid inflation in the form of a yield for committing to a certain amount of time. So we'll have a look at a few of these different scenarios and we'll try and step through how some of this might look, but just think of it as two main plays. So on the accumulation play side of things, that's really good for trying to acquire more Pulse, more HEX, more PulseX, and more loan token. So they're all value producing coins and tokens that you'd want to hold. On the yield-based plays, so of all of the tokens that we have, of the main tokens that we have at our disposal, so that includes HEX, that's a yield producing token. Pulse, that's a yield producing token, we can stake that. Loan, yield producing, we can stake that. And USDL, you might not realize it yet, that's also yield producing. So let's have a look how we could deploy some of these strategies in using liquid loans. So the first thing I wanted to discuss is strategy diversification. So don't pick one strategy. You might have heard of the haunted strategy and you go, great, I'm going to use that. But if you limit yourself to that one strategy, you're one, you're missing out on a raft of opportunities of all these other things you could be doing and yields you could be generating, but you're also not diversified from a risk perspective. So let's see if we can come up with something that uses this tool to allow us to get that diversification. And even within the haunted strategy, you might want diversification within that. So you set different strategies using a similar sort of concept. Now, you can set those up however you like. What I'm hoping to do in this video is just show you some of the options you've got. Get you starting to think about that now, so that when all this gets launched, you're not trying to scramble and make up time. You've got a play in mind. You've got some things that you want to do. So what I've done here is I've just looked at a portfolio and said, okay, out of everything we've got, we could have some of it where we have our, what I call our big pulse bag. So we're never ever selling that. So we've got a big bag of pulse. We don't want to be risky with that. That's our main holding strategy, but we can put that into liquid loans and draw out a little bit of value of it. So you can free up some value without being anywhere near risky. If you're working at collateral ratios of 5,000%, 10,000%, there's almost no chance of that ever getting into any strife in regards to liquidations and things like that. It wouldn't even be a concern. So it's a safe way for you to have some pulse sitting there, knowing that there's no risk, essentially. Disclaimer, crypto, there's always risks. Just got to put that out there. We might have part of our portfolio as an accumulate hex strategy. So the goal for us is to use liquid loans to help us acquire more hex. An accumulate pulse strategy. So that's very much what the haunted strategy is accumulate pulse strategy. And part of it might be loan yielding. So using the loan token for some yielding opportunities. So based on these two types of plays, an accumulation play or a yield-based play, you can set up a diversified portfolio that is doing numerous different things. So let's have a look at an accumulation play. So if you've watched the haunted strategy, you've got a pretty good idea of what an accumulation play looks like. But it doesn't have to be just for acquiring more pulse. So let's just have a quick look at that. So generally, accumulation plays goals are, so trying to never sell the asset. That's the goal. If we can keep acquiring more of these assets, and as we build value in it, we acquire more. That's how the wealthy get to being wealthy and stay wealthy, is they don't sell the assets they're acquiring. They use those assets to be able to go out and buy more. So never selling, and obviously the act of accumulation, so getting more of those assets. So the method in general is, as the price appreciates on pulse, we free up equity and we use it to acquire more of the wanted asset. So this is an extension of the haunted strategy. The haunted strategy was more about acquiring pulse. We're broadening that scope on this one. So let's have a look how that might work. So we deposit some pulse into a vault. We could still use a nice safe collateral ratio like we discussed in the haunted strategy. So we mint some USDL. And what we do is we send that USDL across to the PulseX exchange and we accumulate the asset of choice. Okay, so that could be loan token, could be pulse, could be PulseX, could be hex. So as the value of the pulse in our vault continues to go up, we free up some of that value to go and acquire these other assets. Now, what may happen? Just let's have a look what could happen here. Instead of doing the haunted strategy where we're just buying pulse and putting it back in here, we're doing something different. We buy a bit of hex. We go get that hex. We go put it into a stake for however long you choose over that period of time. So you've acquired more hex. So that's good. You've kept your pulse, freed up some value, acquired more hex. Hex goes up in value. You've staked it, so your hex is going up in value. You're not selling that, but you're getting interest along the way. So how about you take some of that interest, and then you could use that to either pay back down the debt or buy some more Pulse and top up the collateral in your vault here. Extract a little bit more value now. So you've taken the thing you've earned from Hex and you've put it back into the process. So the general concept here with accumulation plays is just acquiring more of the assets. But what I wanted to demonstrate is you can still get all those feedback loops from each one of these various assets that you acquire. Okay, same with Pulse. If you buy the Pulse, you can put it straight back in there. Loan, if you get the loan token, you can sit on it and let the value go up, or you can move into some more of the yield plays. So let's have a look at how the act of doing the acquisition, so using this part of the protocol to acquire more of these assets, flows into the yield component. And once you've got an asset that can allow you to acquire more assets that can produce yields, you're in this feedback loop where you never have to sell. You can extract some of the yield for whatever you need to do without ever having to sell the original assets. So let's have a look at the yield component of it. And this is like, we all know this from being in Hex. This is the golden goose. If you've got something that goes up in value that you don't have to sell, that gives you a yield, that's just golden. You can't get better. You can't find a better asset than that. So let's have a look at yield-based plays now. So once again, yield-based plays are never selling our assets, but extracting some value from what those original assets produce. So as the price appreciates on Pulse, free up some equity, use that equity to acquire yield-producing assets. So in this instance, we're particularly talking about these assets because they produce a yield. Now, PulseX has some really good mechanics about it with the buy and the burn, but it doesn't produce yield. Okay, and that's not negative or positive, that just is. So what we're looking at on these assets is yield-producing assets because this is a yield-based play. So same goes, we deposit our Pulse. We extract some value from the deposited Pulse at safe levels. And what we're going to do is, with this USDL, let's look at the broader picture and then we'll come back and check on something in a moment. So just disregard this last bit. So we free up some value. So once again, we mint some USDL, we send that to the PulseX exchange and we convert it. But when we convert it, so we convert it into one of these assets, but then we take advantage of the staking protocols that each of these assets have. So let's run through what they are just to make sure you understand it. So if you went and acquired more Pulse, so you've taken a safe level out, use that to acquire additional Pulse, which then you go stake on a validator. Staking on a validator produces a yield. Loan token. You go and convert it and buy more loan token and you stake the loan token. Well, if you stake the loan token, you get paid USDL and Pulse. Probably less Pulse and more USDL, but that's how your yield's paid on the loan token. Now on the USDL token, so let's just say you minted extra USDL, well, and that's why I've got this bit here. Well, you don't really have to buy any more USDL because you've just minted it. But if you deposit that USDL into the stability pool, you actually receive more loan. What do you do with that loan? Well, you stake that loan and you get more USDL. So there's a little feedback loop within this whole system just doing that. And that's why I've got this here, because once you mint that USDL, you can go and deposit that into the stability pool directly and earn loan token when you do that. And last but not least, we go and acquire some more Hex. That Hex that we acquire, we stake that. What do we do when we stake Hex? We receive more Hex. Okay, so all of these assets here are all yield producing assets where you don't have to extract the value from them, you don't have to sell the original asset. Okay, like I said, that's different with PulseX because unless there's another way where we can eventually stake PulseX, its value it's getting built into the token, but in order to extract it, you've got to sell a little bit of it. Okay, so that's why I haven't shown it here, because it does act a little bit differently to these other four tokens. These are all yield-bearing assets that mean you don't have to sell the original asset that you hold. So what do we do with the yield we get from these? Well, we sell them for our living costs. So in HEX, we delay gratification, we get paid interest, don't have to sell the original asset, sell the interest to live. So therefore you're keeping the price of HEX up, don't never have to sell it, you just sell what you need. So that's with all of these. So we can, and that's the good thing about yield producing assets, we keep the asset there, but we can sell down the yield produced for living costs. Or we can take that yield and push it back into Pulse to grow our original asset base here and put it back through the feedback loop. Okay, so these are these positive feedback loops where with every single coin we have in the system, we can, that's shown here, we can put it to good use, make it work for us, feed it back into our asset accumulation plays. So the asset accumulation plays and the yield-based plays are very complementary. All right, look, I think that's all I really wanted to cover. We've gone a little bit longer than normal. That's 16 minutes, but I just wanted for everyone just to understand how this could work. So now you're starting to think, okay, penny's dropping now. I can see that this is a complete system that we bolt together within the HEX, Pulse, Liquid Loans ecosystem. I don't know that you need too much else, guys. You can generate some pretty crazy feedback loops, and they're all going to be pushing the price of every single asset you hold. It's all price positive from an accumulation point of view to a yield-based point of view. It's all aces, guys. That's it for me for this one. I'll catch you all in the next video.